Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have another recent reads video for you. So today I'm going to be talking about, it's actually 9 books I've read recently because I have been very busy working on assignments and things, so I haven't had lots of time to film, but I have managed to get quite a lot of reading in, which is quite impressive. So there's 9 books, a couple of them I have reviews etc for coming, so I'm not going to talk about them as much, and a couple of them were for uni, so I'm not going to talk about them as much either. So hopefully this won't be a massively long video. I was debating whether to wait and split it into 2 videos when I've read one more book, but I really just wanted to talk about these books before I forget too much about them. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into the book. So the first book I'm going to be talking about today is On Bodies, which is an anthology published by 3 of Cups Press. This is a collection of essays, short stories, a little bit of poetry, there's some artwork in there as well, from a variety of different authors, all around the theme of bodies and what do our bodies mean to us. There's about 24, I think, about 24 different contributors to this book from a variety of backgrounds, ethnicities and abilities and gender identities. The number of these essays are written by people with disabilities, different kinds of disabilities, and about their experience of particularly of ableism. There were a couple of people writing about body positivity and fat phobia and that sort of thing. A couple of transgender authors or non-binary authors writing about their experiences of like how that affects their experiences of their bodies and their bodies in society particularly. Yeah, and people with different ethnicities and how that affects their understanding and their relationship to their body. So I found this really fascinating, really interesting. Like any anthology, there were some that I really loved and some that I didn't enjoy quite so much. I'm just going to look back at the list and see if I can pick out what some of my favourites were. So I really enjoyed this one called What Her Bones Said, which was by S. Niroshini, and it was a collection of photographs with a little short story, I guess, with each that goes with each picture, so I really enjoyed that one. There were a couple that kind of reflected a little bit on mental illness and how that affects your relationship with your body, and a couple talking specifically about disassociation, which is a common symptom of PTSD. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I'm recovering from PTSD. I'm doing a heck of a lot better than I was a year ago, but it was really interesting to read about other people's experiences of that and how that related to my experience. This is the second book from 3 of Cups Press that I've read, the second of their anthologies. The other one, On Anxiety, I really enjoyed. This one I gave it 4 stars overall, slightly less than I think I gave On Anxiety. I think I gave that one 5 stars, but I think that's just because pretty much every article in that one really resonated with me because of my own experience of mental illness, whereas this one maybe not quite so much. There are a couple in this that I didn't enjoy quite so much that just brought that rating down slightly, but I really do recommend it. I do have another from this series of their books, their most recent one on relationships I haven't read yet, and then I've also got a short story collection from them as well, but I really highly rate this publisher and will keep buying stuff that they produce because they are doing really good work at bringing together interesting voices about difficult conversations, and so I really recommend this book from that perspective. The next book I read was an e-arc I had from NetGalley called The Carolonga or Le Rimalder by Gabriel Squarneck. And if you have seen my wrap up for March, you will know this was my least favourite book I read in March. I only gave it 2 stars. I gave a lot of reasons for that in that video, so I maybe won't go on too much about it in this one, but just to say this, partly it didn't live up to my expectations, and that was, yeah, probably a lot of the reason for that, but also it wasn't, let's say this the right way, I didn't think it was very well written. However, it was written bilingually. This is bilingual speculative fiction. The author is a languages teacher, and so she wrote the book with the intention of giving her students something more interesting to read to help them practice their language skills, and I'm all for that. I think that is a brilliant concept, and I think I just had higher expectations for it. When I heard that it was bilingual, I was kind of expecting the languages to weave in and out of each other, and that wasn't what I got. It was a parallel text, so the French was on one side and the English was on the other. The level of the language was much lower than my current level of French. My French is a bit rusty because I don't use it as much as I used to, which is why I'm trying to practice reading in French more. This was more basic than what I was looking for, really. I mean, it's still good practice. Added to that, the storyline wasn't very interesting and some of the representation was quite problematic. There was one section of the story which was about a false rape allegation, and it was just unnecessary, didn't add anything to the plot, and just had some really questionable stuff in there. So having said that, I do really admire what the author was attempting with this book. She is a polyglot, so she writes in multiple languages, which is really inspiring in its own way. I just don't think this book quite hit the mark for what I wanted from it. But if you are someone that is trying to learn French, or if you speak French and you're trying to practice your reading in English, then you might find this book helpful. I think I said this in my wrap up. It's just as easy, and you get better practice, I think, from just being willing to read children's books in other languages. And the intention of these books is that she wanted to write something that would be maybe more interesting for her adult learners than reading children's books, but I think that really sells short what children's books are and can do. That's all I'm going to say about that one. And I'm going to try and speed up a bit because I've been talking quite a long time already and I only talked about 2 books. The next book that I finished was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I had this out as an ebook from the library. Again, I talked about this one in my March wrap up as being my favourite book of the month. I gave it 4 stars, but it was quite a high 4 stars, and it's definitely one that I want to reread at some point in the future because I think there will be a lot more details that I get out of it. The main protagonist in this book is called Addie LaRue, and obviously, as her name's in the title. She was born in 17th century rural France and has seen her life mapped out for her. And so one day, in order to try and escape from this life that she is not looking forward to, she kind of makes a deal with the devil, which grants her basically eternal life, but she is instantly forgettable. Anyone who meets her doesn't remember her. The story traces her life. It's told between the present day, which in the novel is 2014, and Addie's path leading up to how she's got to this point. I thought it was really cleverly written. I really enjoyed it. I really liked Addie as a character and seeing how her character developed. The other central characters, Luke, who's the kind of devil figure, seeing how his character adapted and changed over the time that Addie knows him. That was really fascinating because often with these kind of deal with the devil type stories, it's very short. People make their deal and then it's usually a very short-term deal, so you see the ramifications very quickly. But because this was spread out over like a period of about 300 years, to really see those characters, that relationship develop, I thought that was a really clever take on that story. And then the third main character was Henry, and his story, his backstory was really interesting as well, and I found him quite a relatable character in a lot of ways. He's kind of like trying to find his purpose in life and trying to be his own person when everyone else has expectations on him. Yeah, I found that quite relatable. So I really enjoyed the interaction of these different characters. I really enjoyed how the story developed. I love dual timeline stories, so that really appealed to me as well. I was worried I wasn't going to like it when I realised it was written in third person present tense, but actually V.E. Schwab is a really accomplished author. I mean, this was the first book of hers that I'd read, but I could tell that she knows her craft because she pulled it off in a way that most authors can't. But also it really worked because Addie has to live in the present moment. She can't build history with people. She has to live every moment in the present because people don't remember her. So I thought it was really, really cleverly done, and it's definitely a book that I recommend, and I am definitely going to pick up more V.E. Schwab books because I really enjoyed this one. The next book that I finished was The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. This was one of the oldest books on my TBR, so I'm really glad to have read it. It's quite short. It is kind of a Catholic classic, I guess. St. John of the Cross was a monk in 16th century Spain. This book is based around a poem that he wrote that kind of emerged from a night of prayer, I think, and then his reflections on what the poem means and why he wrote it. It was really dense, and while I did take some stuff from it, I don't know whether I need to, I think I need to reread it at some point when I have less stuff going on in my life, because I think a lot of it went a little bit over my head. I wasn't really concentrating enough on it as I was reading it. The language is quite archaic in some sense as well, because it was written in Spanish in the 16th century, so it's kind of the equivalent of Shakespearean language. So it was translated in that style, and yeah, I think maybe just I probably could get more from it if I reread it. I only gave it 3 stars. I expect on a reread I maybe would raise it up a little bit, so it's one I'm going to keep and reread at some point. I don't really have a lot more to say about it than that. The next book I finished was Forgotten Women, The Scientists by Zing. I have just filmed a review for this and another book from this series, Forgotten Women, The Leaders, so I'm not going to talk loads about it right now, but I will link to that review, which I probably will have published before this, so I will link that video in the description box so you can check out more of my thoughts. Just to say, I really wish I'd had this book as a teenager. I think it really would have helped me to hear these stories of really significant women in science, because it's really important for women to have these role models and to see these women that have done these amazing things that have largely been forgotten by history. Also really, really beautiful illustrations in these books. So I should say I had a sample of this from NetGalley. I hadn't realised it was a sample when I requested it, so when I realised it only had 5 of the stories, I went out and bought I ordered online and bought myself the full book so that I could read it, because I just wanted to read the rest of the stories, and then I discovered all these beautiful illustrations. So really do recommend these books. I've enjoyed both of the ones I've read so far, and there's 2 more in the series that I'm going to get soon, hopefully, and read them too. If you want some inspiring stories about women that have been largely forgotten by history, this is a really, really great series. As I've already filmed that review, I'm not going to say much more about it than that today. So the next book that I read was Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the first book in a series, which I've forgotten what the series is called. It's dystopian and I really enjoyed it. This was one that my friend picked from my TBR for me to read. Actually, this was given to me by my friend Kayla for my birthday last year, so I'm really excited to have got around to reading it. I loved the protagonist, Maggie. She's like a strong female lead, but also she's a really troubled character. She has a lot of issues. I really liked that she wasn't like presented as this amazing, like everything sorted out, got it together kind of woman. She was like, no, I'm a mess and everything's a mess. Which is kind of what you expect more in a dystopian novel, I guess. I thought the development of the story was really interesting. I think it's a lot of inspiration from Indigenous American mythology and legend, which I really enjoyed. Really keen to carry on the series. I think the second book is out already. I don't know if any more of the series are out yet, so I'm looking forward to carrying on this series. Yeah, let's tell you a little bit more about the story. So Maggie, the central character, she's a monster hunter, and in this society there's been this cataclysmic flood. A lot of the world has been destroyed by it, and this one area of America, a lot of the indigenous people managed to protect themselves from a lot of the effects of this flood, and so they kind of separated themselves off. But since then, there's been a return of kind of monstrous creatures, and so Maggie has been trained by the son of one of the gods to fight them. But at the beginning of the story, he's kind of left her, he's abandoned her, and she's not entirely sure why, but it's got something to do with her own past, how she discovered her gifts. She and a number of the other characters have clan gifts, and these are kind of bestowed on them by their blood, their heritage as indigenous peoples, and you have 2 clan gifts, one from your mother's clan and one from your father's clan. So both of Maggie's gifts make her really adept at killing monsters or killing anything really. So at the start of the story, she is hired by this village to try and rescue a girl that's been kidnapped by a monster, and then she's trying to find out where this monster came from, how it was created. She teams up with a guy called Kai, who is a medicine man in training, and he has his own giftings as well, and they head off on the trail of trying to find out where these monsters came from. I really enjoyed the setting of this book. I thought it was really well described and really well put together. The characterization, Maggie's character development was really interesting. I mean, basically she has PTSD. So a lot of what she describes about like trying to repress memories, or the memories coming back when she doesn't want them to, the feelings associated with that, the kind of panic associated with that, I found a lot of that really relatable. Yeah, lots to enjoy about this book, lots that I thought was really cleverly done, and definitely a series that I'm looking forward to carrying on with. So thank you to Kayla for sending me this book for my birthday, and thank you to Penny for suggesting I read it. Yeah, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I finished was The Myst Forgotten by Catherine Webb. This was another of the oldest books on my TBR, so again really happy to have got through it. This was a really interesting story, I really enjoyed it. It's historical fiction, but kind of with a lot of mystery elements tied into it. So it's set in and around Bath at the beginning of the 19th century. So it's again told across two timelines. One part of the story is set in 1803 through to about 1809. The other storyline is 1821. The story follows two central characters. Well, kind of three, I guess. So there's two central female characters. One is Starling, and she is a founding child. So in the sort of past storyline, around the age of 7, she arrives at this farmhouse and is taken in by a young woman called Alice. And she doesn't really remember anything before arriving at this farmhouse, but it's become quite clear that she was badly treated wherever she was before. So Alice takes her in, decides to bring her up kind of as a sister, but she's also taught how to be a servant just in case anything happens, so she's got something to fall back on. Alice has a benefactor called Lord Ffoulkes, and he has a grandson, and they come and visit Alice quite regularly, and Alice and the grandson Jonathan are sweethearts, and so that becomes very clear quite early on. The present day storyline, 1821, Alice has mysteriously disappeared at some point in the intervening years, and Jonathan was fighting in the Napoleonic Wars around the time that Alice disappeared, and so he's been left disabled and quite mentally affected by both what he witnessed in the war and Alice's disappearance, which he's been told that she ran off with another man, which he knows isn't true. Starling knows it isn't true. He's a recluse and he's just kind of tied up in his own misery. Starling is really keen to try and find out what happened to Alice, and she's pretty sure Jonathan knows more than he's saying. The other main character then is called Rachel, and she was from a good family, but they fell on hard times, and so she has taken a position as a governess. At the beginning of the story, a wine merchant called Richard Weeks offers to marry her, and she thinks this is her chance to escape from a life of servitude. But her marriage doesn't turn out to be all she's hoped for. And then one day, she and Starling cross paths. And that's about all I can tell you. The plot is a lot more complicated than that. But that's kind of the starting point where it all kicks off. So it follows these two women and this man and how their relationship develops. You do find out eventually what happened with Alice and how their stories all intersect. It's really cleverly put together, and it's a really searing I'm going to say this in the right way, kind of the author's intention is to present the other side of the story to what you see in Jane Austen novels. She's a fan of Jane Austen, as so many of us are, and really love those books, but they present a very positive portrayal of what women's lives in the 19th century were, whereas this shows a lot of the hardship that women had to endure, that they were very much reliant on the men in their lives. How the men treated them affected how their lives would turn out. I found this really quite a powerful story. Some of the portrayal of mental illness, not brilliant, but some of it was pretty, was quite good. In a lot of ways, Rachel kind of acts like a therapist to Jonathan, and I did see the benefit of that sometimes, but I don't know, it wasn't necessarily great representation, but I suppose in that historical setting it probably kind of is fairly accurate. I don't know. There are a couple of things that just stop this from being a 5-star read for me. I suppose the portrayal of Jonathan as a mentally ill person is probably one of them. Another one is some of the phraseology used. I'm not going to say it in case you do pick it up, because it was one of those things that once I noticed it I couldn't unnotice it, and so I don't want to ruin this book for anyone else that reads it by pointing that out. If you do read it and you want to talk to me about that, then let me know. But yeah, there was a lot that I really enjoyed about this. I really loved the mystery elements. I loved the way the characters developed. I loved the way the relationships between the characters developed, and I thought the conclusion, the climax of the plot, how it all fitted together, I thought was really cleverly done. Yeah, really enjoyed this book. Really glad I finally got around to reading it. Would definitely read more books by this author. So I gave this one 4 stars. The next book that I finished I'm not going to talk a lot about, which was one I read for uni called Interpreting the Psalms. It basically is that. It's about how we interpret the Psalms. I read this because I have been doing a class on the Psalms this term, and I've just finished my assignment, or one of my assignments for it. So this book was really helpful, really enjoyed a lot of it. If you're interested in understanding more about the book of the Psalms in the Bible, how it fits together, how people have interpreted it over the years, particularly if you're involved in church leadership or preaching, then this would be a very useful book to you, but I'm not going to say much more about it than that. It's been very helpful to me for my class. That's that one. I gave that one 4 stars as well. And then finally, the last book I'm going to talk about today. Again, I'm not going to talk a lot about this because I just finished filming a book diary for this. So this is The Gilded Ones by Namina Fauna. This was our Space Sirens book club pick for March, and we're talking about it. Probably will have already talked about it by the time you see this video. So I'll link my book diary, which you'll probably have already seen before this video as well. And I will also link our Space Sirens live show where we talk about this book so you can hear more of my thoughts. I'm just going to summarise to say I really enjoyed this. This is YA fantasy inspired by African mythology. It's quite feminist in a lot of ways. The setting is a very patriarchal society where women have to undergo a purity ritual at the age of 16, and if they are pure then their blood is red, and if they're impure then their blood is gold, which means they are descended from demons according to the society. But this gives them superhuman abilities in a lot of ways. So the story follows Decca, who discovers that she's impure around the age of 16 in quite a devastating way. There's quite a lot of violence in this. I haven't been giving content warnings for any of these books, but what I will do is I will link to the book trigger warnings website for each of these books in the description box so you can go and check out what all the content warnings are. I've realised that there are generally too many in a lot of these books for me to be able to remember all of them, and so I'd rather link to that website that gives a much greater overview of the content warnings than miss any. So this book does have content warnings. I think very helpfully, it's only brief, but the beginning of the book the publishers have put in that there's graphic violence in there. There's quite a lot right at the beginning. While there is more throughout the book, if you can cope with the first couple of chapters then you'll be fine because it doesn't really get much worse again than that. This story is about Decca's journey once she discovers that she's impure and what that means, and she starts to learn more about her heritage and why she is the way she is and why the society is the way that it is. I really enjoyed this. I struggled with it to start with, but once I got into it I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to say anything more about that because we'll be talking about it both in my book diary and in that Space Sirens live show, so go and check those out if you want to know more about what I thought about it. But I gave this one 4 stars as well. That's all of it. This has taken a long time. This is why I usually make these videos after 5 books, not after 9. But that is all of the books I'm going to talk about today, so let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know some of what you've been reading recently. If you can't think of anything you want to say and just want to let me know that you've been here, leave me an emoji to let me know what the weather's like where you are in the world at the moment. Here it's very cloudy and cold. You can also like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on my social media. All that information is listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.